What is up, Starseeds? I'm Sid, and today we are going to be talking about piercings. Now, I came with the notes, so we might hop around a little bit, but I want to get into these interesting things that I have found researching this topic. I also want to say, peep the sweatshirt material t-shirt that Dakota Wint gave me when he gave me this tattoo. Just kind of felt right to wear for this video for some reason because he is all about traveling. If you haven't watched his videos, you should go check him out. Anyways, I was looking into piercings. I have a video, I'll leave it in the description of this video, but this is the thumbnail. I talked about how I had a weird reaction to getting my belly button pierced when I was 18. So I have kind of dove into the history of piercings, what cultures pierced what area of the body, and really the progression of piercings. In a future video, I want to look into really the pros and cons, kind of the Ayurveda, the holistic medicine behind piercings, if certain piercings in certain areas of the body can influence energy in positive and or negative ways. I currently don't have any piercings. I used to have 3 in each earlobe and a nose piercing. I had it in my right nostril. Upon doing research, I found that some women in India pierce their left nostril to signify marriage and because it allegedly boosts fertility. Upon other reasons as well, but that's the one I found the most interesting because it kind of gets into that energetic flow, which would make sense if you look into acupuncture and things like this. I haven't looked into it that much, but I do know that areas of your hand, areas of your feet, areas of your iris can reflect certain organs in the body. So this is going to be something that'll be super fun to research in the near future. But for now, we're going to be talking about the history of piercings and all of that jazz. I never really put 2 and 2 together that the Buddha probably had earplugs because his ears are droopy, likely due to piercing or holding heavy things with his ears, probably through piercing. And the fact that now they're droopy would mean that he's taken those plugs out or he's not wearing that jewelry anymore, signifying lack of attachment to those jewelry items. King Tut, King Tutankhamun of Egypt, ancient Kemet, his mummy was found with earrings. So let's get into these ancient discovery of piercings. I will say, doing some of this research, I realized that a lot of ancient piercing jewelry material was natural material, like wood, like bone. Some of these organic natural materials decompose, but the body doesn't. And also they might just kind of fall out and be laying wherever, you know, the body is laying, but the flesh is gone. So it's not like there's going to be some little gold or silver jewelry lying there. They didn't use that. So when you find these skeletons, you're not going to find that. If you find preserved human remains like mummies and stuff, you can see more. But it is a fact that piercings have been around before history. They are prehistoric. That's what prehistoric means, is it's predating written history. But human remains suggests that body modification goes back 25,000 years. I actually found some things that were more like 29 or 30,000 years old, so we're gonna talk about it. I also have come to find that the oldest piercings are probably ears, lips, nose, and actually cheek piercings. If you look up pictures of people in other countries, of other cultures, really tribal people, a lot of them have like septum rings in their nose or piercings that go through their cheeks as well. In Central Europe, Ice Age hunter-gatherers, specifically 29,000 years old, likely wore cheek piercings as early as age 6 to 10. So evidence suggests these piercings are likely made out of materials like wood or bone that did not survive, but it caused distinctive chronic wear on the molars and the canines of these kids and adults. Researchers believe that they did this as like a rite of passage, even though they're still young kids. They also found that they might have started with one piercing and then later added a second one as they grew up, which is kind of interesting and I guess backs up the rite of passage theory, which is a very common thing for cultures all over to have certain rites of passage ceremonies. Usually they probably weren't 6. Usually they were probably more like 12, 13, 14, if not older. But to find some as young as 10 years old isn't that far-fetched to me. So while generally online says that earrings and nose piercings are some of the oldest piercings, this is evidence of cheek piercings being one of the oldest piercings. There was also a 12,000-year-old human skeleton found in Tanzania. It was a man who had his teeth kind of filed down. Originally, researchers thought that he had filed his teeth down as a form of body modification, but now we think he wore a lip ring, and that's what caused the damage to his teeth over time. So there was evidence of a labret worn through his lower lip, as well as indications of piercing in each cheek too. Generally, in some tribes of Ethiopia, it's the women who wear these big lip piercings, but this was a man who had one. So for as long as people have been piercing their ears, they've also been stretching their ears. You might think this is kind of a new thing with gauges being popular in the past few decades, but stretching of the earlobes has been around literally just as long as the little earring studs have been around. So King Tut allegedly had pierced ears, also stretched ears. They found multiple different sets of earrings in his sarcophagus. It was thought that only women and children wore earrings in ancient Kemet, but this and other examples show that royalty also had pierced ears in Egypt. People really all over the Rift Valley, which is this area from like Southwest Asia to really Southeast Africa, many tribes stretched their lobes to make them longer and wider holes. Specifically in Kenya, in central and western Kenya, they used wood logs to stretch the ears. In other places, they used other materials as well. In Mesoamerica, they would use glass and, even more popular, probably the jade crystals for jewelry. And a lot of the times they would practice bloodletting, and that's when they would be pierced. Also coming of age rituals, of course. When I was searching tongue piercings specifically, the number one thing that came back was in ancient Maya, the bloodletting and tongue piercing connections. I also want to point out that piercings were super popular in Europe too, like ear piercings and stretching of the ears was very popular in ancient Europe. But then once religion took over, religion was kind of against it. It also wasn't just the ear piercings that were popular in Europe. Genital piercings were popular all over the world too. Studs were common in ears, but piercings on men's genitals were to stop them from having kids, keep singers' voices high-pitched, and to keep athletes energized and not use up too much of their testosterone in ancient Rome. Before doing the research for this video, I didn't know that temporary piercings were a thing, but that's probably the most common among the genital piercings, is the temporary pins that you can insert. However, the permanent genital piercing has been popular for probably thousands of years. India also had these genital piercings for sexual pleasure. The Kama Sutra is one of these texts that reference genital piercings. When I think of Indians with jewelry, I think of mainly women with the nose piercings like we talked about, and just extravagant earring jewelry as well. Belly button piercings too, because there are a few very feminine Hindu deities with these piercings. So in Egypt and Mesopotamia, ear and nose piercings signified your royalty and status. Pharaohs also wore navel piercings, and in Mesoamerica, like the Mayans, Aztec, Inca, they had tongue and lip piercings that were central to these blood sacrifice rituals to communicate with gods. Indigenous tribes had septum piercings, which marked initiation, while lip plates in parts of Africa signified economic status and maturity. South Asia, as well as India, nose piercings linked to Ayurveda and marriage symbolized beauty and marital status. Ancient Rome, nipple piercings could show a gladiator's strength or be a symbol of wealth. So this is a popular theme that I've seen around the world, is most of the time nipple piercings are associated with really strong masculine traits. Sailors would get nipple piercings when they crossed like a certain longitude or latitude if they sailed around the world, or if they did like a long voyage. They would also have their ears pierced too. So the ear piercings and the nipple piercings were big for the male sailors. In ancient Rome in general, the male nipple piercings were a symbol of masculinity. I believe I saw places in Africa and a few other places around the world that the nipple piercings were a symbol of strength, masculinity. There's also places around the world that have nipple piercings signify femininity and just beauty, and they would get them to make their breasts look larger, I think because you're kind of distracted by the jewelry in the nipples, so it creates this optical illusion. There's people who say that it would allow the nipples to stay looking a certain way, even though modernly now, if you ask a piercer, no, the nipples are not going to stay hard forever. They're going to be normal nipples. They're just going to have jewelry through them. So I'm not exactly sure the physiology behind that, but there was a certain nipple piercing where it kind of connected the two, and you could even put like heavier jewelry stuff on it. So maybe that made them hard all the time because there was all of that tension constantly on it. Anyways, the Otzi Iceman is the oldest known mummy that had stretched earlobes, showing ear piercings, extravagant history. And that's 5,300 plus years old, although we've talked about examples who seem much older. The Iceman was found in a glacier in Italy, but the oldest earrings that we have found in a grave date to 2500 BC. These were found in the Sumerian city. There's so many ancient references of earrings and just piercing jewelry in general. There's references in the Bible. Genesis 24:22, Abraham's servant gives Rebecca a nose ring. There's also references in ancient Hindu texts like the Vedas. The goddess Lakshmi in the Vedas had piercings. Other earrings were found between the year 400 and 300 BC between Russia and China, that area. Native Americans also wore earrings, specifically like the Pacific Northwest area of America. Also, I've heard that the Crow tribe practiced dangling themselves from their piercings. They would have temporary shoulder piercings and they would swing from them. So piercings combined with suspension was very important in the spiritual ceremonies of Native Americans, featuring in many variants of the Sundance ceremonies. Not all, but many. Crow Nation did this, as well as I'm sure many other tribes and nations. During this ceremony, men who wished to obtain visions were pierced in the shoulders or chest by men who had undergone the ceremony in the past, and then suspended by these piercings from poles in or outside of the Sundance Lodge. There's also some Southeast Asian rituals who practice body piercing as a form of spiritual self-mortification, and usually the person getting pierced tries to enter this trance-like state, to have it be a really spiritual experience before the piercing begins. We already talked about how sailors had their ears and or nipples pierced when they crossed the equator or when they crossed a certain latitude or longitude. It's also rumored that Roman men got their nipples pierced to hold their capes. I can't even imagine that one in my mind. We know that they got them pierced as a way to represent their masculinity and their strength, but did they hold their capes? Possibly. It became okay for Europeans to wear classy piercings like little studs in their ears and things like this, possibly a nose stud, but it wasn't okay for other people to wear any kind of piercings. Like if you were a foreigner and you weren't that white-looking person, high-class-looking person, wearing a little piercing, even if you had just your ears pierced but you were of a different race, it was not looked at as okay. Forget any wild-looking piercings. Those were definitely not okay. But in the 20th century France, during this bohemian movement, there was Mademoiselle Polaire. She called herself the world's ugliest woman, and she wore a Southeast Asian-inspired nose ring. There's depictions of her with a septum ring and like a regular kind of nose ring. We've got nose piercings is documented as far back as 1500 BC. Piercings of these types have been documented globally, while lip and tongue piercings were historically found in some African cultures. Nipple and genital piercings have also been practiced by various cultures, with nipple piercings dating back at least to ancient Rome, while genital piercing is described in ancient India. the year 320 to 550. The history of navel piercings is less clear. The practice of body piercing has waxed and waned in Western culture, but it has experienced an increase in popularity since World War I, obviously, with sites other than ears gaining subcultural popularity in the 1970s, spreading to the mainstream in 1990s. So what happened was, Queen Elizabeth wore earrings at her coronation, and that kind of made it okay for other people to wear real earrings, because in the early 1900s, clip-ons were super popular, or like a screwback, just not real piercings in the ears. But then you get around to the later 1900s, and earrings were okay and pretty much the norm for women. But the nose piercings and other piercings like this didn't start until like the 1960s. This hippie movement, people were drawing inspiration specifically from India because people were getting into philosophy and stuff, and so you get into Eastern, like Indian, Hindu philosophy, and then you get the nose rings. Eventually appreciating these other cultures, the lip rings and the belly rings. The 1970s, it really picks up. Then there's these guys who open up the first piercing shop. It's a big deal. There's also rumors that they spread a lot of misinformation about the history of piercings. They were into the BDSM scene, so that's when the nipple piercings and these other like tongue piercings started to become popular again. The eyebrow piercing was not popular back in the day. There's really no historical reference to it like all of these other piercings we've talked about, actually. But yeah, that's just kind of the more modern 1990s punk era trying to be edgy and rebellious. So there was an Aerosmith music video for Crying with Alicia Silverstone, and it showed her getting her belly button pierced in this music video. And certain radio stations, and maybe even MTV, played the video like multiple times a day, maybe multiple times an hour. So everybody was seeing this multiple times an hour if you were in that demographic to be watching that video. Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, she had other piercings besides just the belly piercing. She had, like, whether they be real or fake, lip piercings and nose piercings in her pictures back in the day. But you had Beyonce with the belly ring, you had like Ginger Spice. It's kind of funny and ironic that piercings used to be this deeply cultural, spiritual thing, and now they're kind of a form of rebelling from your culture and stepping out of it. Sure, there's still people who get certain piercings for cultural significance of it, but generally, at least in the Western world, teenagers get pierced because they want to. They want to be rebellious. Also, dermal piercings, like surface piercings. Dermal is where it's not just the surface level. They kind of have an implant thing in there to hold the piercing in better, so there's less complications with it and less infections because we've modernized how we do things, piercings included. But the piercings just anywhere on your body, like the back dimples, the other weird areas you can get pierced, your chest and stuff, that's become popular. That wasn't really around until maybe the 90s, probably more so the 2000s, and even just the 2010s. It's improved so much. Nose piercing has been practiced by tribes in the Middle East, tribes in Africa, as well as Australian Aboriginals. Like, piercings have been around on literally every continent for thousands of years. Many Native American and Alaskan tribes practice septum piercings. It was popular among the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the tribes of New Guinea, who adorned their pierced nose with bones and feathers to symbolize wealth. Lip piercing and lip stretching were historically found in certain tribal cultures in Africa and the Americas. Pierced adornments of the lip, or lebrettes, were also in Papua New Guinea and the Amazon basin. Aztecs and Mayans wore lebrettes, while the Dogon people of Mali and the Nubu of the Nile Valley wore rings. The practice of stretching the lips by piercing them and inserting plates or plugs was found throughout pre-Columbian Mesoamerica and South America, as well as among some of the tribes of the Pacific Northwest of Africa and some parts of Malawi. It was quite common for women to adorn their lips with a disc. Women in a tribe in the Nile Valley wear lip rings that on occasion may reach 15 centimeters. That's like 3.9 inches in diameter. All right, you guys, I gotta go, but we're gonna talk more about piercings in the near future. I appreciate you guys so much. Peace out.